Welcome to A Woman's Brew, where women talk about beer. This is the second part of our home brewing episode, and in this one, we answer all of your questions. I'm Joanne, and with Tori, we're two beer loving women on a mission to get more people drinking and talking about great beer. Come join us. Should we pour these second beers?
We should indeed.
What have you got?
I mean, I already told you I've got the mustard beer.
Oh, yeah.
What do you have?
I've got my raspberry wheat beer.
I've got your raspberry wheat, but it wasn't chilled enough. We alluded at the beginning to the fact I've got my next beer. We've got our next beers, by the way. And I just want to shout out saying, so you made this mustard one back in February.
February time, I think.
It feels ages ago, but I think it's because I saw the Oscar Blues one ages ago and I got you to agree to brew it in February.
It was the beginning of the year anyway.
Yeah, I've had a few sips already. And I actually would say that I think it's got better with time. Because like the real like orangey notes come out more in it and the spiciness comes out more.
Yeah.
And it does like, when I originally had it, I was like, yeah, no, it doesn't taste like mustard at all. And I wouldn't say it tastes like mustard now, but I think over time, the parts of it have come out more strong that are the elements that make up mustard, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I had one a few weeks
spiciness.
Back and it was very limey, like the fruits were really coming through.
I would say, yeah. I mean the citrus, like the orange piece of it and the spiciness, the sharpness, a bit of like, you know, maybe a bit of like almost lime, orange spice. It is exactly what I think probably the Oscar Blues was supposed to encapsulate. But I'm not here to talk about this at the moment because I feel like we've already covered this one. So we sort of alluded to the fact that we had gone and done a brew day on a commercial level with Heist. So we are so grateful to Heist, and we're going to do a whole separate episode on it. So we don't really want to talk about it too much because I think there's a lot to be said about it and we've already talked a lot already. So but what I thought would be quite interesting, you know, from your standpoint as a person that's homebrewed quite significantly, to kind of understand, like, was there anything you felt you learned from that experience of brewing on commercial kit to a higher volume?
I mean, I think you always learn something when you go and brew with somebody else. That's always kind of a bit of a collaboration of ideas and methods. It's a similar process, but it's a very different process. So it was nice to brew on the scale that Heist brew on. Like they're still relatively small and everything is still very hands-on. I think like seeing how they chill their beer, because like they have like a heat exchanger and things like that. Watching the way that that they sparge and like how they do things, and do you know what, we were working with Scott and Chris because unfortunately Rachel couldn't be there and we were all really sad,
but we were very sad that Rachel couldn't be there. But they were
amazing
and they were the nicest people.
Scott was really good at going over, like without being asked, like going over each step and why he was doing things and how he was doing things and like explaining the equipment, because obviously the equipment is on a much bigger scale than anything that I have at home. I have commercially brewed, air quotes, before. I've helped out at Wildcard on International Women's Collaboration Brew Day, but usually there'll be a few commercial brewers who are also there and they kind of get really stuck in to the important stuff. And then, you know, we clean out the mash tun, maybe chuck some hops in, clean some lemon peel all day. Like, it's the kind of thing we do.
It's like it's segmented in the like, you get specific roles. You're not doing necessarily like the end to end. Like, we got a chance.
So we got to do like the whole thing. I thought it was really interesting, and talking about like the equipment, because obviously they've got a bit of technology there, like checking temperatures and things, and you know, like probes in the fermenter to check the temperature and things like that, so they can keep it consistent. What I particularly enjoyed was trying the beers off of tank. That was really fun. That was.
It was
really
a
fun.
burden. It was a burden on my bed.
And then like, because they are starting a barrel program. Sneaky. So you know,
we should probably check if we can say that.
I know. I mean,
I think they've
in
I think I was gonna say I think they also put something out about that was their test, or maybe that was their test kit. I don't know.
But we'll cut that bit then. And a thing that I found really interesting was that they've still got a smaller kit that they test things on, so they can do it in a smaller amount. And you know, that's just sat there in the brewery as well as the bigger bit for making other stuff. So you know, it's all about scale. So brewers will do things on small scale just to test it. No, sometimes it doesn't scale up the way you think it will. That's always interesting to talk about. But yeah, it was really interesting. I think I always learn something on a brew day.
For me, it was just a learning process overall. Yeah. That's why it kind of wasn't really, because I'd only done the one
length
beforehand.
Of time is a lot longer because there's a lot more liquid to process.
So that was kind of like what I took away from that. Not the only thing I took away, obviously, but like the key point that for me, because obviously I'd done it back to back in the sense of like I'd only gone to you like a few weeks prior, and then having done like one homebrew where I was kind of watching you, and then you'd say like, okay, do the sparge now and do this, do that, and then getting stuck in on like a commercial level like only a few weeks later. What I noticed the biggest thing was arguably there was more waiting around and I'm not sure at the commercial level, and I'm assuming that's probably because sort of the equipment that you're using,
there's more liquid to process.
But also like because you have those other tools that help out on that commercial level, you don't necessarily have to stand over something. You do. I mean, never really quite as hands-on as I am in the kitchen. Yeah, it's you've got some things that help ease that a bit, so there's maybe slightly less pressure on that front, so slightly more ability to kind of chill out a bit more. I mean, it's still very like it is still very hands-on. It was cool. I got to dig out mash. You've
got to if you're in a collaboration, if you are the visitor, you've got to clean out the mash tun. Them's the rules. And literally everyone that we met that evening was like, did you clean out the mash tun? Yes, of course we did.
Yeah. It's funny because obviously I was working. Well, again, I don't want to talk too much about it because we'll talk about all this, but I was working in the morning, working for the brewery. I'm fairly certain my colleagues, but I mean, they all took the piss like to my face, like, oh, you're working out of a brewery? You're working out of a brewery, are you? You're working. I was like, I promise I really am.
Definitely didn't slide you a tiny beer at one point.
Yeah, I was fresh from tank. She like came up and was like,
try this.
And also thankfully it was an internal call, but I was on a call as well, and Joanne walked right behind me with my videos on. She walked behind me and she's like waving frantically as she's walking by, and I don't even think anyone clocked it, to be honest, because there were so many people moving around in the background. I only had the camera on because like somebody's like, oh, you're working from the brewery, and I was like, yeah, I'll show you what it's like, and then I just left the camera on. And we do a lot of video chat for my work versus like having cameras off like most other companies do, so they were taking in the scenes. I don't even think it phased anyone that you walked by and waved frantically in the background. It gave if anything, it made me laugh. And I was like but yeah, I was genuinely working in the morning, so I missed the very beginning of it, so you did the very beginning of it. So when it came time to dig out the mash tun, like, who dug it out?
That was your job.
Buggins here.
I held the bags.
She held the bag.
I dragged the bags across the brew house.
You
Thank
did.
You very much.
You definitely did. But because I missed I got a few chances to sort of like paddle things. But it was I
tell you what I did learn. I need a step to be able to get right into the mash tun. I'm a little bit too short.
I think I was just the right height.
Yeah, I'm a bit too short.
If it was a smidge higher, I would have been like pits deep in it. It would have been hard.
I needed to be a bit higher to get like the proper leverage to properly stir the mash.
Oh, yeah, that was hilarious when I walked over and you were just like on tiptoes.
Yeah.
But like I said, we'll talk more about that. But I just thought it was just kind of interesting to kind of understand from your standpoint, somebody that's done it. Was it something like from your end? Was it something that felt like such a new experience compared to what you were used to, or were you just kind of like, here's the next step of what we're doing now, I'm all good? Like, did it translate fairly well?
Yeah, I think it does, but that's because I've been to commercial breweries before and seen how they do it. Like, it's just bigger. Like, I think if you've got a good grip of what the brewing process is, it's just bigger, and there's different tools that can help you do it.
Cool. So that brings us on to our remaining section, which is the general Q&A that numerous people have submitted via Facebook, Instagram, my text messages, because my friend has submitted some stuff as well, because I know that he's actually quite keen. He started homebrewing recently as well. So I thought he'd be interested in this topic as well. He's doing I think he's doing a bit of like an internship type thing over at one of the breweries in Bristol at the moment. Nice. So he'll get to sort of see that experience of home brewing versus commercial brewing as well. So that's cool. So yeah, to start, where do you recommend buying your kit from?
I mean, any of those homebrew places, or if you really want to go and talk to someone, find a homebrew shop.
Are there any other places that you can get them? Because I know like you've managed to get some from like people selling on Facebook.
So I have ended up with a plethora of demijohns because someone was giving away brewing stuff. If you have a local home brewing group, join that. If they've got a Facebook group, join that. You can often exchange things, or people will be selling bits off that they don't, because they've gone bigger or they've got something newer, so they'll be selling bits off. Or
you nearly got an all-in-one
things. I know, I nearly got an all-in-one.
You're too slow.
I missed it.
You thought about it too. You thought about it too hard.
About it too long. I did, and somebody else got it. But yeah, check for local home brewing groups or amateur brewer groups. Check Facebook and eBay if you want something cheap. Or like my friend picked up a whole bunch of demijohns and bottles for me that someone was just giving away. So, just keep your eyes peeled for things.
Another question that was sent in: how much kit is too much kit?
Too much kit is that you haven't got anywhere to store it. I don't think you can ever have too much kit.
Is that like the rule of beer as well? You never have too much beer. You always have the right amount of beer, unless you don't have anywhere for it to go.
Unless you haven't got any storage space for it. It depends on your storage space.
It goes from right amount to there's nowhere for it to go too much.
yeah, exactly.
Love that. Ingredient storage. So you kind of mentioned, you alluded to it a little bit, but any like sort of tips and tricks, like how do you store your ingredients? Anything people need to know about ingredient storage?
I mean, really, you want your ingredients as fresh as possible. On a very small scale, often that isn't as easy as it can be. I keep all of my grains wrapped up tightly in an airtight container. My hops are in the freezer because I only use a little bit of the hops. And then when I'm about to use them, I do check them because they can start to go cheesy. Oof. And then they're not good anymore. I've not actually had any go cheesy on me before I've used them. So
descriptor makes you feel ill.
They just don't smell right. Like, what they smell like, and they just don't smell right. And yeast is best kept in the fridge. But yeah, just think about, it's like the same with foodstuffs. Just think about appropriate storage of them. And think about,
would you keep that outside of, like, I know you store yours in the freezer. How long could you sort of keep it outside?
If it's vacuum packed and completely sealed and you haven't opened it, you can keep it for quite some time. If you've opened it,
in or out of fridge?
Out of fridge. Like, you want to keep it, you don't want to keep it like anywhere hot really, but you can keep it somewhere cool. If I haven't opened a bag, I don't tend to put it in the freezer until I've opened it, because once you've opened it, you'll let air into it, and that's when it starts to go. So that's when they go in the freezer.
Fair enough. I think so. Looking at how your grain storage was, if people have like a smaller scale of it, my thought was get one of those cereal containers that are like totally it's got like the rubber bit around it, so it like airs off if you want to keep it a bit more like not in a bag, not completely, because I know yours is sort of like it's sealed quite well. You have to like let the air out, seal it, and then tape it. But top tip, if you've got those cereal containers that are like airtight, those are probably, that was my observation of what could make for really good storage. Not that you want to listen to me over Jo though, because she definitely has more expert knowledge than I do in this area. How long can beers last that you've homebrewed? Or anybody's homebrewed?
It depends on the style. It's the same as any other beer. It depends on how you store it. It depends on the style. So anything that's really hoppy, you're going to want to use quickly because those hops are going to fade. Anything that's like a big stout, you can probably age for a while, but you don't want it in fluctuating temperatures. You want it somewhere cool, stable, and away from light. Certain styles will get better as they age. Like I did my very first fruit beer I made with cherries, and it took 18 months for that cherry flavor to properly develop. So we're about 2 years down the line now, and it's pretty good right now.
Do you think it like hits a peak and then just like dips?
It can. Off? I mean, it can do. I mean, that's the same with any beer. Like it's just, you know, if you're storing it properly and consuming it with it, like if it's a hoppy beer, drink it fresh. If it's a darker beer, you can keep it a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, to start, this was already quite like I quite enjoyed it the first time we had it, and the fact that it's been however many months down the line,
it's spiced.
I know, but the fact that it's like however many months down the line, and it actually takes.
Some improve with age. Sometimes if you get a brew and you're like, oh, that's not quite what I wanted, leave it for a bit and it might get better.
What was the style of this? I can't remember.
It's wheat beer.
Was it wheat beer? Yeah. It's held up, so happy days. What's the next question I've got? So do you need to store homebrewed beers in a particular way? Is it the same as a commercially brewed beer? I think you've kind of answered that.
It's the same.
Could you keep it in a cupboard if it was a stable temperature versus a fridge?
Yeah, you can do it. Like same as any other beer. Store it the best way that you can. I would say with homebrews, you want to keep them stood upright, especially if they're in bottle, because you are going to get sediment and you want that left at the bottom.
Next question. Is it better to do a second fermentation in a separate vessel or just ferment until bottling in one?
I mean, I don't, but people do.
Is there like pros and cons to doing one over the other, or is it just preference, or?
It's just preference and how you want to do it. Like are
there certain styles that impact it, I guess?
Not necessarily. It depends on what you want it to come out like and what the recipe says and your experience. I think I've noticed that a lot of American home brewers do secondary, like take it off of the yeast and do secondary fermentation. I've always just kept it in. I don't leave it in long enough for it to affect it. Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, absolutely max is how long I will leave a beer in a demijohn. So that's not really long enough for anything to impact it negatively anyway. So I just take it out of the demijohn and bottle it. Some people, like, there'll be pros and cons to both ways. That's just the way that I do it. Do a bit of research, see what people say online, and do what feels right for you.
Maybe try both. See what you prefer. See what you like.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know where you specifically find inspiration for your beers.
So I will brew what I want to drink.
Do you want to give some examples actually before you finish that question? Do you want to give some examples of what you've brewed? Because some people obviously might not have known.
So I brewed Vienna lager, mustard beer. I've done a raspberry wheat. I've done a chai mild.
Oh, it sounds amazing.
I like to do something a bit weird. I like to try different things. I have also done I've done a cranberry and I did a cranberry saison. My saisons come out really well. I am a saison brewer. I did a cranberry saison. I did an orange and basil saison.
You say it like it's a bad thing and it's not an amazing thing.
I did a lemon and rosemary saison.
That's the one that I thought that I was getting out because that's the one you submitted that to a homebrewing competition.
I did, and I came 12th out of 44, so I was quite happy with that.
That's more than 50%.
Right. And it was with Three Hills. And Andy, we spoke to Andy at the Outpost, and he was like, there was this really nice saison. I was like, that was mine. So that was really good. I like to do things that are a bit weird because I'm only doing a small batch, so I can do something that's a bit weird. And if it
doesn't work out,
most things come out quite well. I have got conditioning right now a dark saison with cherry.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some of that.
Yeah, I think that's gonna
Was
be good.
those your Kent cherries?
Yes, with Kent cherries. My raspberry wheat was the first one that I tried with the tea trick that I learned off of Drew from Boutiliers.
What are you talking about? Drew doesn't do that.
Don't know what you're talking about.
I
also did a pineapple pina colada milkshake pale, and that had Sabro, pineapple, and pina colada tea.
I know you
it.
don't really rebrew anything. Can you rebrew that? That was obviously before. That was probably ages ago before I was getting your homebrews.
Yeah, I think that was before we knew each other.
You're gonna need to rebrew stuff.
Yeah, I might have to rebrew stuff
for this audience.
In the works, I want to do. I think I need to make the pumpkin spice latte with chocolate drizzle that we talked about.
My pumpkin spice order, my Starbucks
because
PSL.
I started working out the recipe for that. So
can you call it like? Can we specifically call it like Tori's PSL?
Yeah.
Can you do like a label that's like a Starbucks cup and then it's my name on it?
Yeah, I can do that.
But for anyone that doesn't know, it's my pumpkin spice latte order from Starbucks.
Yeah.
It's the second one we were gonna brew, but we had to scale it back because I basically said to Joe we were going to do a pumpkin beer together because that was the second obvious choice of what we do together, especially for the time of year. And I was like, when I go to Starbucks, I was pitching it to her like I was on Dragon's Den. Like I was like, I go to Starbucks and I get an iced pumpkin spice latte, no whip, pumpkin sprinkles, and you get the mocha drizzle on the top, and then you get this lovely PSL with a chocolate situation, and it creates an amazing autumn color. It creates like brilliant colors. Yeah, I would die in a good way. So
in the works, I would like to do an Oktoberfest, but that will have to be February. I would.
Do you want to explain why it has to be February?
Because previously I said I have no temperature control, so I have to do lagers in February, March, so they go in the shed. There was something else I wanted to brew.
Your Vienna again with rye.
I was saying
that to me.
I've been doing a Vienna. The only beer that I've ever rebrewed is my Vienna lager because it was a Sam Adams clone, and it's not quite right, and I'm not happy with it, and I think it needs more spice, so I might add some rye to it. Nice. And there was something else I wanted to brew. I've got some more Kent cherries, so I need to brew something with cherry.
Submit your ideas, people. Yeah, something you think she should brew with cherries.
With cherry, let me know because I've got like about 600 grams of cherries in the freezer.
You've done a cherry stout, haven't you? So that's kind of like you could do that again, but you've done that.
Yeah. I think that came out more like a barley wine because it came out at 15.6%.
Funnily enough, I was going to say maybe a barley wine with it after having done that. Low keys, but I guess that kind of counts. Yeah, I think that you should say like if someone submits you a really amazing idea, that's the one that you should brew. So get your ideas submitted.
Yeah, send your ideas to me and I will develop recipes.
So the TLDR of the inspiration is just you brew what you want to drink.
I brew what I like, and then I come up with what I want. And I'm like, this is what I want to brew. So then I go and look at other people's recipes because you can just Google it. You can literally just Google pumpkin spice stout homebrew recipe and loads will come up. And then I have a look at all these different recipes. I also have homebrewing books that I really enjoy. And there are books that have clone recipes in them. I'm looking at them, which is why if you're on the video, I'm looking over my shoulder.
She's just being very rude.
I've got the big book.
She doesn't even want to look at me when she talks.
I've got the big book of clone recipes, home brew beer, which is a Dorling Kinsley one, which is really good. Brew is another good one. Like they've got recipes in, so you can look at those. I got some out of the library, and I have a vintage recipe of a parsnip beer. That sounds really weird, but I feel like I want to try it to see what happens.
I mean, what's the worst that happens? It's not.
One beer that came out really well,
drinkable,
that I was happy about was my friend is from Faversham, and she really enjoyed Abbey beer that was brewed by Shepherd Neame, but they don't make it anymore. So she was like, could you brew me this Abbey beer? And I was like, well, I need to find what the recipe is. So I actually found a vintage recipe of Shepherd Neame's Abbey beer. and I scaled it to my kit and I brewed it. And when she drank it, she said it was exactly the beer that she was looking for.
Happy days.
Woo! I was pleased with that.
Well,
that was an hour and a half boil. PS. That took the entire day.
That also ticks off one of the questions, which was like, how do you create your recipes? I feel like you've just answered that as well.
I searched for them. I searched for them and then I tweak them. And I've kind of got a feel for what I know, like depending on what ABV I want, I know how many kind of kilograms of malt I need. I know a little bit about different malts and what they're going to give me. So I will go with different ones. It can be quite difficult being a person in the UK because there's a lot of US recipes and they have different malts to what we have. So you have to kind of find equivalents. It can also be difficult to get hold of the hops that you want, but there are really good resources on hop equivalents that you can use instead. And I have a book called The Hop List, which talks about equivalents as well. So you can just substitute things in and you just try things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that was part of a conversation we had with somebody else, and I can't remember who exactly it was with. It might have been Red from First and Last.
Yeah.
But was it? We had a conversation with somebody who was talking about how it is quite difficult to source hops on a larger scale.
Yeah.
When you're a home brewer, like it's difficult to get your hands on certain things because you just can't. I remember who we had the conversation with.
Was it Grace?
Yeah. Yeah. Cut all that out because let's not timestamp that.
Yeah.
But that reminds me of like the conversation we were having with someone that we both know. That was it will become apparent to listeners at some point. It's difficult to source hops on a homebrewing level, or certain hops, certain malts, certain ingredients on a homebrew level.
The newest hops, like
they're not going to be the freshest.
Try and get cryo. Try and get like cryo pop. You got no chance, mate. Like,
I mean, that's the hot
because
hot at the moment.
the hot new hotness in hops. Good luck trying to get that. Like, commercial brewers have trouble getting some of that. So you're not always going to get exactly what you want if you're trying to like clone something or something like that. So you got to kind of work with what you've got. And I find that there's like, so American malts are different. Like a lot of recipes I see use honey malt and we don't have an equivalent of that here.
Sounds really lovely though.
Yeah, it sounds really good. And there's a few recipes where I was like, oh, I really need, and like you can find substitutions for things, but sometimes you just got to kind of tweak it with what you've got. And sometimes I just want to brew with what's in my box to use it up.
Because I imagine sometimes you probably had to get, maybe you've done like back-to-back recipes where you're like, oh, I'll just get a bigger bag because I know I'll need this, or this is something I'll use commonly. But then maybe you start brewing something else and you don't use that as much. And then you're like, oh, I've still got all this. I want to try something else, but I also don't want this big bag sitting around. So I will
always buy like Marisota in 5 kilogram bags because that's generally going to be my base malt.
Which really helped us out when we needed it.
But anything else I tend to buy in like 1 kilogram 500 gram bags because that's all I really need of it. Wheat I tend to get in a bigger bag because I tend to use a lot of wheat in things because I like a creamier mouthfeel.
So I guess it's kind of like maybe a recommendation for people as well if they're doing it themselves. Like start smaller, playing around with things, figure out what you like making and how you like your things.
Which is why kits are really good to start with because you get it already all portioned out.
And then you can go, I really like this style, that style, whatever. And so you know that you're going to buy a big bag of X type and a smaller bag of Y type. So something that people might not think of if they're jumping in and they're really excited to start. They might just be like, buy all the stuff. And then it's actually
malts aren't that expensive. But you can end up with them sat around for quite some time. And if you've got them sat around, they're not as fresh. So you're not going to get, breweries go through bags and bags and bags of malt. So they're going through it really quickly. So it's much fresher than if, it's been sat in my box for a little while. And that's fine because I'm not selling to anybody. I'm just making for the fun of it. But if you want to make like really top class beer, you need quality ingredients. So, you don't want it sitting around for too long.
So what are the styles that you think are better or less recommended to attempt as a home brewer? I mean, that could be, is there something that's better or worse for somebody to try as a newbie? And are there certain things that you just shouldn't really try on a homebrew scale?
I mean, you can make anything on a homebrew scale. You've just got to follow the instructions.
Are there more like user-friendly ones?
Oh, yeah. So something that's more simple, and really brew something that you want to drink, because at the end of the day, you're gonna make, depending on what size you're going for, you could have 6 pints of that, you could have 46 pints of that, and then somebody's got to drink it.
That's
otherwise
true.
It's just a waste. So brew something that you want to drink for a start. Go for something more simple to begin with, just so you can kind of work out the process. You want to go, pale ale, simple IPA. You don't want something with lots of malt additions, lots of hop additions, lots of fancy ingredients for your first one. And then just kind of build up from there and see how you feel about it. Like, just have a go. Sours and things like that can be more difficult, because you have got to kind of keep it. If you're going to do a sour, if you're going to use lactobacillus or Brett, that's going to get in everything, so you will need separate sets. I've not been brave enough to try anything like that yet, because I feel like I need a full different set of equipment so that it doesn't contaminate it and mess up my future brews.
I was going to say, is that something, had you done a sour or a gose before, is that something that you want to try at some point?
I would like to. There is that yeast, the Philly sour yeast, that is apparently really good for souring stuff in a simple way, as simple as it gets. So I would like to try something like that. But because I love a sour, so I'd like to try and make my own. But you just kind of got to build up to those things. If you feel confident doing it, give it a go.
So it's kind of like, there's not necessarily a better or worse thing to homebrew.
No.
It's more just maybe start basic until you understand the basics.
So you understand
and then
the
it's
process.
Following a recipe. So
yeah.
Sours being a bit more challenging because of kit.
If you were learning to cook or bake, you wouldn't start by, making the most amazing souffle, the most complicated, croque en bouche, if you're starting out baking or cooking, we're not expecting you to pull out the most amazing, bake off showstopper. And it's the same with brewing beer. Like, you need to start simple and learn the process and then build up from there. Mine was a vanilla porter, nice and simple.
You say nice and simple, but like, it's that kind of thing that doesn't sound like, it sounds more, I think, like it sounds like it's more like elevated than if you're saying it's like a simple level.
Yeah,
it would still wow somebody that didn't know how to homebrew.
It was really delicious. Like, we were going to share it with friends, and Gordon was like, I don't want you to give this away, I really like it.
Knowing Gordon, I especially appreciate that. That's a very high comment.
Right? He wasn't just like, tastes like beer. He was like, this is nice, we're not giving it to other people.
Yeah, especially like the style and everything, like absolutely brilliant. What is the next one that I should ask? So what app do you use for Brewing? You kind of already said that, but do you know of any other apps that are
I use Brewer's Friend. There are other ones, you can just Google them.
Fair.
Google homebrewing
app, but the one that you recommend is Brewer's Friend.
I use Brewer's Friend. I find that really user friendly. And
it's all about that UI.
Yeah, but if you use, it keeps telling me, I've just opened it up so I can have a look at it. It's got an update that it wants to do, but that one, if you use it on your phone, you can do as many recipes as you would like. There's paid for subscriptions, so you can like share recipes and blah blah blah. I don't use it on a computer. I use it just on my phone, because then I can do as many
Is it limited if it's on your? Is it limited on a?
Yeah, and you have to have a subscription if you do have a desktop. Right. And if you want to share or sync these to your desktop, and because you can share them with other people so that they can see the recipes and things, then you have to have a subscription. So it depends on what you want to do with it. Have a look at the different options that are available, but I just use the free app on my phone.
Fair enough.
And it's easier to have my phone in the kitchen than it is my laptop on a brew day.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess because you also do, like you said, you kind of have like your paper and, you put pen to paper for some of it as well. Like, if you really like something and you want to record something that went really well, you could probably just write it down.
It depends on what calculations you want to make. And if you get like one of the systems one of the all-in-one systems and things, you can do some of that via app, and there's calculations and things you can do on the computer. So like I'm still very basic with my 2 pots and my sieve. So
do you think you'll ever, like, this isn't a question someone's asked, but do you feel like you'll ever branch out from that someday? Like, do you personally want to go all in one by choice versus if you find something that just happens to be the right price at the right time? Do you ever want to go commercial with it, sell your beers? Or
I don't, at the minute I just quite like doing it as a hobby. I don't know whether I'd want to go commercial with it at the minute. That's not my goal. I like the education side of beer, and that I enjoy brewing with other people, but I don't necessarily at the moment know if I want to own a brewery.
That's fair enough.
I just quite like doing my fun stuff in my kitchen.
I guess there's less pressure as well, so you can be you can be creative to a degree in a brewery doing commercial level. I mean, I think some breweries prove you can be very creative, but obviously it also comes down to how much money can you make for that creativity. When you're doing it on a smaller scale, there's like less finances that go into it, and there's less that go into it. Loss.
And I can just brew what I want to.
You can brew what you like, and you don't have to go
think about what other people like. What do people want to buy from me? I don't care. I brew what I like.
You can make a pumpkin spice
mocha. And if I drink if I just drink all 6 myself, cool.
I mean, you don't, because then you have to send them to me now. I feel like I've latched on now, and I'm like, Joe, you have to send me at least one of everything you're brewing. Any secret tips and tricks that somebody may not know on their first home brew, but that could be very helpful to be aware and cautious of if it's your first time?
Sanitize everything. Follow the recipe.
Sanitize me.
Literally sanitize everything. Like, do not skip anything. Follow the recipe. I sound like, Prue and Paul on the technical. Follow the recipe. Timings and temperatures are very important. Do not scrimp on that. that there are chemical processes that are happening because you need to have it at 75.6. So make sure you've got it at 75.6 degrees Celsius, because otherwise your processes are not going to happen. Don't worry about it, and then don't worry about it too much. Just enjoy yourself.
I think with a lot of things, like
keep some sanitizer in a jar afterwards.
That's a good one. I think like homebrewing and being no different. There's a lot of hobbies and just different skills in life that I find the more you stress about something and the more you fixate on it, the more it's not going to turn out the way you want. The more relaxed and calm and cool and collective you can stay, sometimes turn out better. So,
do not think you are weird if for your first brew you sit there for some time just watching it bubble away, because you're like, it's fermenting, it's working, and it's so like you literally just sit and go and watch it sometimes, because you're like, it's doing its thing, it's fermenting, the yeast is working. It's supposed to be doing that. And like my one fermented, like I got bubbles for like 2 days and then it stopped, and I'm like, oh, have I broken it? Is it wrong? No, sometimes it'll just stop and it's fine. But when you first do it, you probably won't be like trying to take readings and with a hydrometer and everything like that and checking all of that. You'll just brew. Don't worry, like enjoy the fermentation while it's happening. Don't worry about it when it stops.
It was your face as well.
You literally did. The video. Like, that's the best thing. As a home brewer,
can we make that the cover of this episode? Was you going, it's doing
it's so good when it's like, because it'll sit there and it'll be quiet, and then suddenly hear bloop, 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 bloop. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And when it does that, you're like, it's working.
To be fair,
it's doing its thing. It's the best.
We brewed, and then we like sat there that night. We were watching RuPaul's Drag Race, and we were sat there, and I was like during the day, it wasn't doing it. I was like, oh, it's not bubbling. I don't know what to do. And then we kind of like waited a bit, and like nothing happened that night. We were watching RuPaul. I kept looking over, and I was like, it's not bubbling. Like, what have we done? And then the next day,
It was going for it.
I was like, oh, it's blooping.
Yep.
Like it was very exciting.
That's the best noise. As a brewer, that is the best noise.
I feel like you captured it really well. That's some real brewery ASMR right there.
Yeah.
Hashtag brewery ASMR. We're gonna make that happen. I've made it a thing.
This is Tori's new venture.
Happen. It is. It's one of my new ventures for my multi-billion pound corporation. How do you come up with the recipes? You already kind of answered that. What are the limitations of home brewing versus commercial brewing?
The amount that you can produce. That's literally it. Like if you talk, like when we spoke to Damien from Emperors, he realized that he could homebrew just as well as a commercial brewery. Like if you can get the ingredients and you can develop the recipe, you can make a good beer. It's just the amount that you can make and the amount of money you can sink into it.
Yeah, and I guess realistically there is that, to a degree, that level of like your limitation on ingredients, but it's not necessarily a limitation, because you might be able to get something.
Yeah, you might be able to find a way. Like if you really want something, you can find a way. And it's distribution, getting it out to people, maybe more difficult as a home brewer than as a commercial brewery.
So to end, I've got a couple questions from my friend that I mentioned earlier, who's been homebrewing, and he WhatsApped me some questions across. Don't know if you can elaborate on them at all, if there's any opinions you might have around them. So the first one was really the first thing that he wanted to learn kind of as a next step was water prep and the importance of it. I guess, are there certain things that you have to do to water or can do to water? What's the impacts of how you do it? Is there a prep that you kind of need to do? And then I guess anything home brewing level wise when it comes to water that you can use that would cause an impact.
I don't do anything to my water. I use tap water. Where I am in Kent, I'm near Dover. My water is quite hard, but it is quite good for stouts and things like that, which is generally the kind of styles that I brew. It's quite good for. And I hadn't looked into it. I think if you're just going to start, just use tap water and see what happens. I was slightly surprised. I went on a brewery tour at Canterbury Brewers in Canterbury, and they said they just use tap water and it works for their brews. So I was like, oh, well, if they're a commercial brewery, they're using tap water, I can just use tap water. You can get like water reports, find out what your water's like. You can look at recipes and see, like, if you're doing a particular style, like, pale ale came out the way it was because of where it was brewed. The water does make a difference to beer, but unless you are trying to very specifically create a water profile from somewhere else, I wouldn't worry about it on a home brewing scale.
I guess it's like a West Coast, like, so I know with Siren, like
as
West
long as
Coast
you've got,
IPA,
clean, drinkable water, you can make a beer.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like I said, so Siren for their West Coast IPA, I know that was like a big something that was kind of talked about, was like the water profile is different. That's why a lot of times there's maybe West Coasts that aren't necessarily the way they're supposed to be,
because you've not got West Coast America water.
And I know like you tried the Sam Adams that was contract brewed over here, and you were
it's
like,
not quite the same,
it's the same recipe and everything, and you were like, oh, something's off, and then they said to you like, oh, well, it's going to be the different water profile basically. And I know Siren as well, like, have that new water treatment stuff. And there are some breweries, I think, that have water treatment stuff to it. But I guess if the overall is, you don't really need to do much. I mean, what would there be a massive difference if because you've got a Brita water filter? Yeah. If you used your Brita water, I mean, it wouldn't, you'd have to do quite a lot of it, because
you'd have to do a lot for the amount of water that you want, and then you are stripping stuff out of it, so then you may be stripping out the good stuff as well. And you could use bottled water. Again, that's had a lot of stuff stripped out of it.
I think I've heard of people using bottled water as well.
You can try bottled water if you'd like to, but there's stuff that's been stripped out of it then. So I just
trade-off, really.
I just use my tap water. It's up to you. Like, you can get properly into the science of water. That is probably one of the hardest, most kind of chemistry based bits, is getting into water chemistry for your beers. Like, that's pretty advanced. So
I imagine that's I imagine as well, like, it's not like we were saying, yeast, there's quite a lot of like layers to that you can sort of discuss and go into, but at least you kind of have control over the yeast element to a degree. Water, unless you've got probably a significant amount of money to treat things in different ways.
You can try and get a water report for your area. We had this conversation with Scott at, I don't know if you were there, but I had this conversation with Scott at Heist, and they haven't been able to get a definitive water profile for their area, and they're a commercial brewery. So sometimes it's more difficult than you think it is to be able to get that information. So
but it's like that thing of, if you're wanting it to be very specific, you're going to have to pump a lot of time and a lot of money to get the treatment facilities to get it.
You can check, but you can check, like you can check the pH levels, and you can check what's in it and things like that. And there are things you can add to it, or that will remove or take away or add things to it. You can put tablets and things in. I've never done it. I just use my tap water. And it comes out fine.
Be interesting to see, like, if anybody has played around with different water types and has that first-hand experience of trying these different methods. Let us know, because we can always sort of do a quick follow-up, because it'd be quite interesting to know if anyone's done that. Let us know on the Instagrammies or whatever. The last question that he had was he kind of wanted to learn as well about cold crashing at the end of fermentation to drop out the yeast and hops before packaging and bottling. He said that he reckons that that's more so if you're wanting to get something clear versus hazy. He prefers hazy beers. So first of all, I thought it would just be good for anyone that doesn't know, if you could explain what cold crashing is, and then when you'd want to use that process, what are the added benefits?
So from what I understand of it, because I've never done it, not got temperature control, so I can't do that. If you've got something that you want it to come out particularly clear, you, at the end of fermentation, you would drop the temperature dramatically, and that will make all the particles like drop to the bottom, so you get a clearer beer.
It's like a polar plunge for beer.
I'm never fussed by it, because it's homebrewed, so it's a bit hazy. Like, enjoy. But yeah, that is a process you can do. You need temperature control to be able to do that.
Is there any reason you'd want to use that process other than to get a clearer beer, or is there any other benefits to it?
Lagers are good for that, like, you want that kind of clearness from them, so that's process you want on that.
I'm at the end of my beer now. I'm down to just the bits of the bits that have a little bit of bitty bits to it, as you had mentioned earlier.
Sediment.
I don't know why the word just escaped me.
Bitty
bits is what came to my head when I went completely blank, so it just came out bitty bits. So yeah, I'm down to the last bit that's got sediment in it, as you suggested earlier I would, and out of your home brews that are ready for me to drink at the moment. So with that, Joe, actually I've got one final question for you. Would you consider doing a once every however many month brew of stuff that people recommend? Like, you could do a drawing. We could all submit you ideas of what we want you to brew, and then you could do a drawing of, like,
I could do
the best
one.
I
was one of the mead makers that I follow on TikTok, was they have D&D dice, and they have it numbered, so they roll the dice and they're like, okay, it's going to be like this, and it's going to be like this, and it's going to have this.
That's pretty cool.
So we could do that at some point.
Or I could just, the reason I was asking is I just want to submit you.
You could just tell me what you want me to brew.
But if other people have any like really cool ideas that they'd like to see you sort of do,
you can message me on Instagram, tell me what you want me to brew.
The lead into the socials, Joe.
My if you'd like to suggest some brews that I could make for you, I am A Woman's Brew on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, mostly on Instagram. Or come to Love Beer Learning, where you might learn a bit more about home brewing, because I'm thinking about doing some home brewing content on there. So that is Love Beer Learning on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Pinterest. We also have a website, which is lovebeerlearning.co.uk, and an email address, which is lovebeerlearning@gmail.com. Send us your ideas for the podcast, send me ideas for beers on there, and if you would like to support this podcast in being created, we would love you to become a supporter via Patreon, and that is patreon.com/lovebeerlearning. For £2 a month, you can help us continue to make this content available for everyone, and you get it a whole day before everybody else. Where, Tori Powell, if they would like to ask you about when you're going to homebrew next, can they get hold of you?
Adventures_in_optimism on Instagram.
Done.
Just that.
That's it.
With that note.
On that note,
Cheers.
Cheers.